Alright guys, so today's video, this one is a bit of a head scratcher. When I saw this headline, I could not believe it. And then when I saw all of the videos involved, I really couldn't believe it. But this is a situation where an officer stops this kid. His name is I'm bad with names, Galanakis. He pulls over this kid. He says, you know what? I think you're impaired. I'm going to pull you out of the car, make you do a bunch of tests. Turns out that all the tests were inconclusive. But he tied up the kid for hours of his evening, basically his whole night. The kid then went and requested the body camera footage, posted it online, and then he put little notes on the bottom of the body camera footage, making fun of the officers and calling them out. The kid has also filed a civil rights lawsuit against the police department and the officers that stopped him. And in response to that, the officers filed a lawsuit against the kid for posting the body camera footage and making fun of them while doing so. I'm not going to go through this whole article because that's not my focus of this particular video. But I can say that the officers made a whole bunch of allegations and a judge has already struck down the majority of them, although she is allowing the case to go forward on a very narrow scope, dealing with invasion of the officer's privacy. I am not really qualified to say whether or not that has any bearing. My gut feeling is that the officer's countersuit is all going to get dismissed. My other gut feeling, and we're going to go through this here in a minute, is that if this kid wins any judgment in this case, it's going to be a very, very minor judgment. I do think that he has a right to be upset. I would be very upset in the situation as well. But as far as the courts are concerned, it's going to be interesting to me to see how they rule on whether or not his rights were violated in this particular case. I think the best way to do this is we're actually going to watch the body camera footage and I'm going to react to it kind of as we go. Sorry, I didn't come prepared. But he released 40 minutes of body camera footage from this incident where he was effectively arrested, transported down. Well, he was arrested because he was placed in handcuffs and put in the back of a police car and drove into police headquarters. So he did a public records request for the video and then he posted it online as part of his defense. His claim doesn't necessarily have the validity that he believes it is. And we're going to go through that here when we watch the body camera footage. What I'm going to do, well, my goal is to show you kind of as a citizen how to react when a police officer is doing these things and advise you of your rights in this situation. Because the biggest thing that happened here is that we have a 19-year-old kid who was pulled over by the police. The police asked him to do some things and he complied with those orders. And I think that maybe he did not understand his rights, did not understand that he didn't necessarily have to comply with certain things, right? So here we are, and I'm doing this in my editing software just because it's easier. I can see the breaks and stuff in the video that I want to talk about. So here we are at the beginning of the traffic stop. Officer stopped him for driving with his high beams on. He makes his approach.
Hi there.
How you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good.
My name's Officer Winters with the Newton Police Department. The reason I pulled you over is because you have your bright lights on.
Yeah, I have a headlight out, so I just keep my brights on.
Okay, well that's not legal.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
Yeah, I turn them when a car comes by, I turn them off, but like.
Well, you didn't with me.
All right, so I'm not going to beat that one into the ground. If you have a headlight out, it's a violation of law. If you're driving with your high beams on in the city, it's also a violation of law. I've pulled people over for this before. Just explain to them, listen, you can't drive with your high beams on either. You're probably going to get pulled over either way. So just don't drive with your high beams on because that's going to make people pissed off. But him and the officer have a little go back and forth about that. The officer then asks for his registration and insurance. And you can see he's going to go through the car, have a hard time finding the documents.
Hold on 1 second.
I'm not going to play all of that, but he goes ahead and he finds the registration. He then finds some expired insurance cards. The officer says, look, these are expired. He says, oh, no problem. I'll pull up on my phone. So he pulls it up on his phone and shows him. Now, this is one of the first steps that the officer is using for his probable cause, or it's really reasonable suspicion. But as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, when you're pulling people out of the car and doing searches, reasonable suspicion and probable cause are about the same thing. So When you pull over a car and you suspect that somebody might be under the influence, a couple of observations that you make are whether is their ability to understand the questions and the things that you're asking of them, and then if they're fumbling around the car trying to find things. Generally speaking, what this means is if I ask you for your driver's license, you hand me your debit card or you hand me your work ID or something. You're like, this person is clearly confused because they're not handing me the right documents. Then when it comes to fumbling around, often we'll see people open their wallet and they'll look through and they'll flip their driver's license over and keep going because they just missed it. Or they'll grab a bunch of things out of their wallet and they drop them. And then when they're picking them up, when you're drunk, you lose dexterity and you're having a hard time picking things up. That's what we talk about when you're fumbling around for your documents and stuff in your car. Same thing with the insurance and the registration. People will pull out, like I've got a whole bunch of stuff right here. They'll pull it out and they'll look through it like a dozen times. And the one thing that they were looking for was on top the entire time. If you see that kind of stuff, that's reasonable suspicion that they might be intoxicated. That's probable cause as far as a search is concerned. This kid's going through his glove box looking for his stuff. And to me, he seemed very clear about what he was trying to do. He just didn't know where the documents were. The officer in this case says, you know what? I believe you're fumbling around for your documents. I believe that you might be intoxicated. I'm going to ask you to step out of the car. To me, this is all very reasonable stuff from this kid.
Turn off.
So after he shows him the information, the officer says, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and have you step out of the car, turn the car off for me. And the kid complies. We've already just covered this on the channel. When you're pulled over by a police officer and he asks you to step out of the car, you're required to do so. That's Pennsylvania versus Mims.
Car on or off?
You could probably leave the car off.
I bet. I'm gonna roll my window up real quick.
All right.
As far as I'm concerned, the kid isn't slurring any of his speech. He doesn't appear to be confused about anything. If I was having this interaction, I would not be thinking that there were drugs and alcohol involved whatsoever.
Do me a favor, put your gum on your dash there.
So when he made that statement, he's already made the determination that he's going down an alcohol sobriety test situation. One of the reasons for that is if you're going to give someone a breathalyzer, you have to be able to show that they have not had anything in their mouth for a certain period of time. So when he asked him to take his gum out of his mouth, that's saying he's actually preparing for an alcohol test. So it's kind of funny because the officer contradicts himself later on, but he's already made his mind up right here that he believes this is an impaired driver and he's going to be charging.
Oh my God, my dad?
Yeah. In the car with you fumbling over the registration.
Yep.
Kind of say otherwise.
All right.
And so does the odor of alcohol coming from your person.
Great. Let's do a test and
We'll get to the test.
I can't wait.
All right, so that was the kid's first very major mistake. The officer says, "You know what? I'm smelling a strong smell or strong odor of alcohol coming about your person, and you were fumbling around in your car trying to get your documents." And the kid says, "Fine, let's go ahead and do a test." What you just did is you volunteered to take sobriety tests. When you are driving your vehicle, you are not, and you are stopped by a police officer, you are not required to do any field sobriety tests. You are not required to submit to any tests whatsoever. You have the legal right to decline to take any tests. Am I being clear enough? So if you're out driving and an officer suspects that you are under the influence of alcohol, what he's going to try to do is ask you to submit to field sobriety tests so that he can build probable cause in order to charge you with a crime. You are not required to help the officer build probable cause to charge you. I think I've said it about 4 times now. I want to make sure that is clear to you. So if you're in this situation right here, don't volunteer to take any tests. If the officer asks you to take any tests, say, "No, I'm going to decline to take any tests." When they try to give you a breathalyzer, say, "You know what? I'm going to decline the breathalyzer." Now, I guess with that particular part, I think that you are required to know all of your rights in that situation. It's going to vary state by state. But when you still have the right to refuse a test, but there might be some legal penalties for that. Usually they're administrative license suspensions. I can tell you, well, I'm actually not allowed to refuse a test because I'm a police officer and that's part of my employment contract. But if I was a civilian, if I was not a police officer and I was pulled over by a police officer who wanted to give me field sobriety tests and then wanted me to submit to a breathalyzer test, I would decline on all fronts. I would accept the administrative license suspension, and I would not want to give them any chance to get probable cause to place me on arrest for OVI. That's the end of it. But this kid said, you know what? I do want to go ahead and submit to the test. So the kid's at this point, he's a little pissed off, and due to him being pissed off, it's causing him to get a little cocky, a little arrogant, and he's going to start making mistakes. Some of the mistakes that he's going to do is he's not going to listen to the instructions of the field sobriety test, and this is going to cause him to fail the field sobriety test. So while what I saw in the beginning would not give me probable cause to believe that somebody was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, when you fail field sobriety test, you have hard, fast, probable cause. So he's serving this up on a platter to the officer. And this is why, I don't necessarily think that his lawsuit is going to have any real weight to it, because he does fail this field sobriety test here. One of the biggest reasons is he's talking over the officer during the instructions.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay.
I know the drill.
All right, so I want you to put your left foot on the line. Okay. Take your right foot, put it in front of your left foot with the heel of your right foot touching the toe of your left foot, just like this, okay? During this, keep your arms down to your side. Watch your steps. Count your steps out loud, and once you've started walking, do not stop until you've completed the test, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so the officer told him, keep your hands down, walk heel to toe steps, count your steps out loud, and do those things. Well, the kid's going to start walking. He's not going to.
All right, if you don't have any questions, you may begin.
Gotcha.
No form.
So you want to get to 9?
See, this is where the kid was not listening to the instructions, saying, tell me when I got to 9. That's one of the tells for the field sobriety test, that I told you to take 9 heel toe steps. I told you to count them out loud. And then you're looking at me saying, hey, when can I stop? That is actually a sign of impairment. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are impaired, but impaired people do these things. These tests are designed to develop probable cause. Another thing that I want to go back and show you here is the faults of walking.
If you don't have any questions, you may begin.
He's going to start. And right here, the officer, you heard in the body cam, maybe he'll say in a hot second here, he says, fault 1. So you're supposed to walk heel to toe on this line. His heel is not on the line. His toe is on the line. This is a fault. So far we've already seen one fault on heel to toe steps. He also doesn't count out loud, which is a fault. He takes too many steps going forward. He's going to go out and turn around. He's going to take too many steps on the way back. That's 3 or 4 faults right there on just the first test. These are the things that when this goes to court, if you're trying to sue an officer for depriving you of your rights, and the officer says, listen, he willingly submitted to field sobriety test. I did the field sobriety test according to my training, according to the NHTSA manual, and he failed the field sobriety test. That led me to believe that he was intoxicated or impaired. Regardless of if the initial approach from the officer was wrong, he's actually backed up by your actions. And I believe that the reason he's making these mistakes is because he's being cocky and he's not listening to the officer. Again, the best way to avoid this is refuse to take the test. So we'll go back up here.
So, how
Stops walking 30.
And he's going to turn around. And he's going to go back. And he goes back more than 9 steps. The kid doesn't believe that he stepped off the line. I'm telling you, he stepped off the line. And right here is a heel toe step where he's not touching heel toe. These are all things that are faults on these field sobriety tests.
let's do the breath now. 2 for 2.
Well, sir, I don't believe you are 2 for 2. How many steps did I say to take?
Like 8 or 9?
I said 9. Why'd you take 14 and then 15?
I thought you were going to tell me when to turn.
I said to count your steps out loud.
See, the officer is correct in doing that. So I'm not supporting the officer's actions in this case, but I'm telling you when he is correct and when he is not correct.
Okay, during this, watch the...
So the next one is going to be the one-legged stand. I skipped over the eye nystagmus test because the position of the officer's body camera and his arm, you can't see the eyes. So I
tip of your toe, keep your arms down your side, and count out loud in the following manner.
Repeat the directions.
All right, so you just heard, said foot 6 inches off the ground, keep your arms aside, look down at your toe, count out loud in the following manner, and that's when the kid interrupts him. He goes ahead and gives him the rest of the instructions. I'm trying to make this video less than an hour long. And the kid fails. So he's going to lift up his foot.
How did I tell you to count?
And the officer has to say, hey, did I tell you to count? So again, he's not listening to the instructions. This causes him to fail the test.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Honestly, forgot how you told me, but you're doing pretty well.
So they then went through a series of other tests that I'm not going to go over because I don't want this video to be incredibly long. But the moral of the story is that when you're doing these tests, very minor things are considered faults in the test. So with all that information, they go ahead and give him a breathalyzer. He looks at the lieutenant and he's like, hey, is he allowed to do this? I passed all the tests. The lieutenant's like, yeah. Well, the thing is, you didn't pass the test. So in his mind, he thinks he passed all the tests, that this is all excessive. In reality, he did not pass the test, but they are going to give him a breathalyzer. And it doesn't really show very well, but he's going to blow 0.
Do is make a tight seal around this and blow outwards like you're blowing up a balloon, okay?
Ooh.
All right.
You ready?
Yep. Okay, you can relax.
So you can't see it on the screen, but he blew 0.0 according to Tavon. So he's sitting there saying, look, I'm good to go. Well, that's when the officer says, when's the last time you smoked marijuana? The kid says he hasn't smoked any today, that he's not impaired. The officer says he doesn't believe him, and he actually puts him under arrest, takes him down to the station, and has a drug recognition officer respond. I'm not playing a lot of that stuff because I am not a drug recognition officer. I don't know how those tests work. I can't tell you if he was doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but it's a very technical thing. The moral of the story is the DRE officer is going to come back into the room here after, let's see, I'm right here. I'll change the color so I can find it. So right now it is 1:45 a.m. This all started at 12:15. So he has been cooperating with the police for the last hour and a half. And after an hour and a half of tests, he's going to have a drug recognition officer.
Absolutely, I can.
So your mom is also here. Bottom line up front, we're going home tonight, okay? I don't think I have no evidence or no information to suggest that you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Thank you.
So there is that. The initial officer did not necessarily have probable cause to force anyone to get out to take a test. You don't need probable cause to force someone to get out of the car. You tell them to get out of the car. But regardless of that, he said, I would like you to submit to field sobriety test. The kid agreed to submit to field sobriety test. He failed this field sobriety test. He then blew 0.0 on a breathalyzer and was taken to the station and submitted to a drug recognition exam, a DRE officer. The DRE officer did his whole exam, came in and said, hey, you know what? I don't think you're impaired. We're going to be releasing you. I'm going to be driving you back home tonight. That's when the kid actually says, I want to talk to the officer and everybody that arrested me. And that's what we have here, where he has his cell phone set up and he calls him into the room. So this right here, the guy that can barely fit through the door, is the officer who initially pulled him out of the car and thought he had probable cause to charge him with a crime and put him all through all this stuff. This officer here that can barely fit through the door is the guy that is now suing Tavon for defamation of character. And I think the only reason that the judge is allowing this to stand is because of this particular part of the video right here. Again, I don't believe that this particular part of the video here is going to go anywhere in court. I just don't. Now, my overall thoughts on what happened here. I think I've talked enough about the field sobriety tests and your right to refuse to take field sobriety tests. I believe that if you went through something like this, you have the right to file a civil rights lawsuit. I don't think the lawsuit is going to stand. If it does, the judgment would be a very minor judgment. The reason for that is because you did submit the test. You did fail the tests. There's nothing wrong with an officer asking you to submit the test. You have the right to refuse. If you don't refuse, if you incriminate yourself, you kind of put yourself in that situation. So I don't believe that his civil rights lawsuit is going anywhere, even though he was exonerated. You know, he blew all zeros. He submitted to a drug recognition. He lost an hour and a half of his life. The court is not going to pay out for that. The officers that are suing him for releasing the body camera footage and talking shit about them on body camera. Stop being such a fucking pussy. That's my response to that. As a police officer, this stuff is going to happen to you all the time. I'm on social media and I get stuff like this nonstop, day in and day out. When I'm out on the street, I get stuff like this nonstop, day in and day out. People file complaints against me for stuff that I didn't do. I'm exonerated all of the time on this kind of stuff. When you're a police officer and you're out doing your job, whether you do your job well or you don't do your job well, people are going to complain about you. Those complaints about you do not equate to defamation of character. Taking your own body camera footage of an arrest that you made and posting it online with commentary about what you believe, like Tavon did. He made a bunch of statements about what he believed to be true in the video. He was not factually accurate with his statements, but he's still allowed to do that. As a police officer, just because somebody is picking on you, you can't file. Your rights were not violated. You do not have a claim. You were not injured in this case. The person who is responsible for the ridicule that you're receiving is you. I don't know how else to say this without being personal. This officer is a bitch. That I don't know how else to say it. Don't be such a bitch and don't sue citizens that complain about you. Also, go on a diet, lose some fucking weight. You're disgusting. How's that for defamation? Go ahead and sue me. I probably shouldn't have said that anyway. But regardless, that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys later.